Well guys, this job is turning into a total nightmare. Things that I was not expecting and going on information that was told to me in the past when I got the truck. There's a lot of things going on here that wasn't anticipated, so this job has turned into a nightmare. As you've seen in the last scene, I did get the wheels on the truck, and yes, they look pretty good on there. And you see me use the spacer, and I put the spacers on it, and I took it down the road just the way it sets right now with no bed on it. And because those spacers didn't have a self-centering ring on the inside of it, they bounced. Like you had a really bad out of balance. All your tires are out of balance. So it's not, the wheels are not centering. So I got to looking at other options, and this is what I've come up with. As you can see, that rear end there is identical to this rear end over here. I have to get you down here low for that one. It's identical. Alright, I've counted the bolt holes. I've checked the housing. The shocks mount in the same exact place. The same distance from here, center to center, on this one as it is to the other truck. So we know that the spring width is correct. The reason we need to do a rear end swap is because this one is the right rear end for a dully. Just luckily for me, this rear end is the same exact housing as mine. So basically what I'm going to have to do is the rear end job all over again. I have to take my parking brake cables out, which means I got to take the drums off. I got to take the axles out. I got to take the rear end out of the housing and then swap all that. The only thing I need out of the rear end that's in the truck now is my pumpkin and brakes, because they're brand new brakes. So if they're bad on this one, then I'll just switch the brakes too. I didn't want to go through all this. I didn't want to have to do all this, but at the moment I have no choice. My buddy did bring the truck for me to borrow, but that put me on a bigger deadline because now it won't run. It's a diesel, and it ran yesterday morning. I went to the car wash, washed his truck, and went to Food Line, come back and parked it right where it sets. And it's not getting fuel now. It's a diesel, so it's hard telling what's going on with that truck. So I'm still vehicleless, so to speak. Of course, I can drive that one the way it is. I drove it to Lowe's just like that to get the bed bolts, and that's when I found out that the wheels wasn't going to work, and realized that this is going to turn into a bigger job than I thought it was going to be. So you're seeing the trials and tribulations of how to turn your truck into a dully. And hopefully you guys are learning from my mistakes and miscalculations. So basically I just throwed my money away with the spacers. Now I have to have the spacers in the front. There's no getting around about that. I'm going to have to figure out another route for the front. I could put a sleeve pressed pressed inside the spacer that will mimic the center line, and because it's exactly, the hole in the center of the spacer is exactly the same width inside diameter as the wheel. So basically it just needs a press-in sleeve that sticks out about 1/4 of an inch to center the wheels. I could go that route. Problem is finding something that's going to work for that. I should have known buying cheap was not going to work. I was wondering why they were so cheap. Now I know. They don't have that shank on it that centers the wheel. And I got to looking on eBay on some of the other ones, and they have that little shank that sticks out about 1/4 of an inch. So now I just got finished building my air pressure up and working on the shocks. Going to take the shocks off of it and just the bottom, and then move them out of the way. And I took my brake line loose, and I really don't care if it loses brake fluid or not, because this truck is pretty much going to be scrap. At this point, that's what it's turning into. It's just put an ad up, come rob the parts off of it, and give me some money and go kind of deal. Unless I find somebody to take the whole truck. Anyway, I'm doing this by myself, so that's the part that I'm not liking about this whole job, is doing it by myself. You know, I don't have the body for this, but I have to have the body for it. I have to force myself to do this and drag myself kicking and screaming, because that's exactly what I'm doing. But right here's what I need. I need that shank right there, the flat side there that centers the wheel. Plus these drums are made for the dullies. They got the pins in it right here. Plus this one here is as long as mine is, and mine has the spacers on it. So it's a 6-inch difference in width. So putting this rear end in there, I don't have to have no spacers. I can just slap the wheels on it. I'll know they're centered, and if I have a bounce, that means I have an out of balance tire. Plain and simple. So stay tuned, guys, man. Bear with me. This is probably going to turn into a long project because it's just me doing it. Well, hello YouTube. What we've got going on here is I've worked against myself. Literally worked against myself on this. I don't know if I'm getting both the rear end and me in this, but we're going to try. Anyway, yesterday I pulled this rear end out, and I wasn't thinking before I did it. I was just focused on the end result and wasn't giving any thought to what I was doing. I should have left that mounted underneath the truck so that I had something to hold the rear end up and off the ground in order to get the big drums off. That's pretty much seized on there. I don't know about that one over there. It looks like it came loose a little bit. But this side over here, the brake shoe is up against it too tight and won't let it come off. So I'm going to have to back that off. But it would have been nicer if I'd have just left it in the truck. Then I would have had something to hold the rear end while I pulled the drum off. I don't have that luxury now, and I'm not putting this thing back up in there. So yesterday, while I was when I left off on the last section of this video, I hurt my back, and I'm having a hard time walking today, but I got to put that aside and get this done. So what I did is I came up with the only solution that I could possibly come up with. And I know, Crafted, you're going to be mad at me, But you know, I got to do what I got to do, and I can't do this by myself. So I'm not as young as I used to be, and I've had 3 back surgeries. I'm not going to keep hurting myself. So what I did, I put an ad on Craigslist for someone to help me for everything that's left. So I actually had a guy call me, and he's eating right now, and said he'd be on his way to help me. And so he's going to help me change the 2 rear ends out. I wouldn't have to do this if it wasn't 6 inches longer, but this one's 6 inches longer, so I'm going to have to take all the guts out of mine except for the axles and put in this one. We're hoping that the splines on the axles themselves are the same. I would venture to say they are, but we won't know until the fat lady sings. So right now he's on his way over to help me. Now I'm not going to do no video of that. We'll just pick up after he leaves, and I'll show you what we've got done, if we got anything done at all. But this is just the trials and tribulations that it takes to get an end goal that you have in mind done. So that truck's done in my head. I already know what I want. It's just getting there is the struggle. So you learn, you live and you learn, I guess you would say, what will work together and what won't work together. And we found out that the spacers, because they don't have the centering shank on them in the center, then it renders all 4 of my rear wheels out of balance, because when I put them up on the lug nuts, the weight of the wheel pulled it down to the top of the lug nuts and left a little bit at the bottom. So they weren't exactly centered. So the spacers ain't going to work. So because this rear end's longer, we're going to take it out, put it in there, and switch everything over. And that one should be easy to get apart, with the exception of the springs and the brake lines. I'm a little worried about the brake line, because yes, I put new ones in that one, but that was 5 years ago, so, or 4 years ago, and they've had time to rust. So them things, it don't take much for them to rust to the point where they break when they come off. So I'm worried about that. And see, just the splines lining up with my rear end that I just rebuilt. If you want to see that video on how to rebuild a 10.25 rear, then I'm pretty sure that's what this one is. I think that's what I had to get my clutch kit for. So I think that's 410 rear. I'm certain that's what that is, 410, both the front and the rear. But don't hold me to it, because I don't know for sure. My mind is fading anymore. as everybody else's is too. So we're getting there. It's just slowly happening. The next step is for me to take this one apart, get it clear apart, and the housing scraped and painted. And it's a little cold, so painting's going to be interesting. It should do okay. It'll just take longer for it to dry because of the cold. But who knows? But once I get this rear end housing painted, then I'll go over there and raise that one up and take all the guts out of my rear end while it's still in the truck. We're going to do that one right. We're not going to work against ourselves on that one. And then I'll just lay everything out beside the brakes, everything, pull the parking brake cables out and lay them all aside, and unbolt the springs and the brake lines, and then just drop the housing alone. It won't be very heavy. then we'll set this one up in my truck and put it all back together with this axle, or these two axles, because they're longer. Of course, it's a no-brainer. So we'll keep you up to date. Today we're going to get started on cleaning the new rear end up that came out of the blue truck, and we're going to clean this thing up and make it look like a brand spanking new one. So for starters, we're probably going to go ahead and put the old plate on it so that we don't get any dirt and stuff inside of it, any more than we're going to anyway. So first thing I want to do is put that plate on it. So we'll get that and we'll put it on. I wanted to show you guys one more thing before I end this. Just another thing that I've got to fix on this truck that I didn't know was a problem. Sorry, I had to move you up on the tripod. Alright, well, I have a helper that's helping me now for the blue truck, and I've got you guys directly in the sun. Sorry about that. We was talking about me being able to put dual tanks on my truck, and he actually indicated that he kind of gave me the feeling he was going to help me do that, but I don't know if I want to do all that work, man. But anyway, we was talking about the possibility of switching tanks and putting this one over there too, so I have two tanks instead of one. Well, he got to looking at mine, and I never paid no damn attention to it, didn't even know it. I've never had this bed off, and I mean, it's the last thing you would even think to look for anyway, because it's such a stupid thing to do. You can't imagine somebody being this stupid. The people I got this truck off of had to have been the dumbest people on the face of this planet. They were building this truck to be a to pull and truck and tractor pull. I'm gonna tell you, this truck was not ready for no truck and tractor pull. The first time they hooked to it, it would have fell apart. Literally fell apart. The frame would have broken half. The frickin' axles would have busted through themselves because the front drive shaft was wedged in there to its fullest push in, and they had to take a screwdriver to press it in there, because that's how I had to get it out, because it was already bottomed out. the first time they hit a bump with that thing, it would have slammed that frickin' that drive shaft straight through the rear end or the transfer case. So I had to shorten that so it would have same travel both ways. Well, he was looking at this, and what's missing, guys? Can you tell me what's missing? Alright, I give up. The support that goes from here to here, you see what they did? Somebody's added something, but then they took it back out. Why? I don't know. Why did they take the original ones out? It made no sense. This is the life of your truck or your frame. Without those, it's going to twist and fall apart. But they didn't stop there. They went up and took this support out across here. Now the only thing that's holding this frickin' frame together in the back is that beam right up there over top of that tank. From there back, the only other thing that's holding it together is the frickin' bumper holding it from twisting, and the hitch. That's the only thing. This is such a weak frame at this point that has to be fixed before I can put this bed back on it. I'm not going to put this bed back on it until that's addressed. Now, I don't really like their chintzy ass frame supports, so I'm thinking real serious about building my own frame support and put in there and design them the way I want it designed. I may have enough steel to do that. So we're going to see. My helper, he has a lot of resources for stuff like that, and he said that he might know where there's a frame where we can rob the original ones out. Whichever one's going to be the easiest for me is the one I'm going to take. And here I got y'all in the sun again. So, how do you like my backsplash? A bed. A rusty bed at that. There's why I'm getting rid of it. That and the fact it's not a dully bed. That thing's in pretty rough shape. So, she might be down for a little bit, but she's going to be back to health in no time. Now we've got these spots that we couldn't get to with the big one, so we're going to take and try the air one, the little one. But you get the gist of it, and it looks pretty clean now. So just a little fine tuning up in places like this when I turn it so I can see it real good. And I'm just getting every place that I can get to from here, and then everything that I can't get to, then I'll just go ahead and turn it one more time, do the what I can see there, and then turn it one more time and get the other third. So it's going to be done in thirds. So I got to take the grinder with the sandpaper grit on it and wheel and do that on both of them because they're pitted pretty bad. So we're going to resurface those basically. Too bad I couldn't get it in the middle. I'd really put a new surface on it. Anyway, that'll end this part of how to properly clean your rear end housing if you want it to look good. Anyway, you guys have a good one. Later.